Welcome to the ThunderCast, your Marshall Athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and KD Hudnall. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here. The ThunderCast is on the loose. Thanks for downloading another episode of the ThunderCast. You can follow us on Twitter at ThunderCast_pod and listen to the show anywhere you like to listen to your favorite podcasts. And you can, of course, watch the ThunderCast on the ThunderCast YouTube channel. And while you're over there, please click that subscribe button and the post notification bell so you never miss an episode or any special presentation that we put out throughout the year. And we try to put out quite a few. We figured it would be a good idea to come together today and kind of do a season in review for the Marshall Thundering Herd football season, since we will not be going bowling. It looked like there was a glimmer, very, very small glimmer, when they needed to find a 5-7 team, but it did not make its way all the way down to the herd. So what better thing to do this week to close out the season before we start hitting recruiting really hard and all that stuff? Let's talk about all that happened in 2025. What went right, what went wrong, what needs changed, what needs fixed, and what actually was pretty good. Russ, before we get into all this kind of stuff, I know you put together some really cool statistics. Of course, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I want to get an idea of how you were thinking about doing this episode, since we really didn't talk about it other than to toss the idea out there.
So basically, I wanted to look briefly at what you and I had said season predictions and compare and see kind of how we did. And then looking at the statistics, to me, they told a specific story for this year. And I think as you and I talk about the different things, the offensive group, the defensive group, and the special teams, I think that you will see some clear stories that might not be matching what some of the chatter is on social media or message boards.
Okay. The one thing that I was interested in most, I figured you were going to do some of that more analytical type stuff because that's more in your wheelhouse. And I really like to feed off of that because you bring a good insight, and then that allows my gears to start churning in real time and give me the ability to have some real time reaction and create some conversation, which is what I love. I wanted to go back and revisit how well we did in our position group breakdown series, as far as who was going to be the breakout player, who was going to be the MVP. It's really hard to quantify the most excited to see guy, because that really didn't change, I don't think. Maybe it did as the season went on. But I wanted to see how we did to pick out the breakout, the MVP, and those sleepers that we added this year. So this is going to be pretty fun. I want to get into it, but first we have to get a word from our sponsors at Leasure Oliver PLLC.
If you've been hurt in a wreck, call the law firm of Leasure Oliver PLLC. Found them at 304carwreck.com.
All right, man, let's talk about the generals of the season. By now, everybody that's a Herd fan knows it was a 5-7 season in the first year of the Tony Gibson era. We went 3-5 in the Sun Belt Conference. That was good enough for 5th in the Sun Belt Conference East Division. Marshall had wins over Eastern Kentucky 38-7, MTSU 42-28, Old Dominion 48-24, Texas State 40-37 in a double overtime thriller, and Georgia State 30-18 to round out the wins, and that one was on the road. Losses include playoff team University of Georgia 47-7, Missouri State 21-20, Louisiana 54-51 in a double overtime game, Coastal Carolina 44-27, James Madison 35-23, App State 26-24. And Georgia Southern to end the season at home on Senior Day, 24-19. Before I get any farther into that, I'd just like to note that Marshall played 9 bowl teams this year based on who all is now in and who all is not going to a bowl, and 2 playoff teams, which is far more than a lot of teams this country played this year. So Marshall went, all of their losses this year were against bowl teams, if that means anything to anyone. We were able to get 2 wins over bowl teams as well. So let's start. Well, first, let me get your reaction to some of that, if you have any reaction, before we move in to start talking about the offense.
Yeah, this schedule was a little more toward the end of the year. You look back and say, it might have been a little harder out-of-conference schedule than you thought. Missouri State ended up very well in their first year of Conference USA and FBS. Lost that game 21-20. I've got a lot of thoughts about that as we get into it to talk about it. But, the Sun Belt was down a little bit this year. And it got rated right before the season started. In the offseason, it got rated. Coaches and players, more players than anything. But I think when you start to look at when we get into these individual offense, defense, and everything, you'll see kind of these matchups that we had against these teams, and the way this season could have went slightly different on this schedule. 5-7 and 3-5 could have actually been something else. And I'd like to see where you thought that at maybe the end of the show, maybe right now, but like after we talk about the stats, I think would be a little bit better of saying, having said all that, where could we have ended up?
Well, I was thinking about that actually as I was writing down the wins and losses, because it was natural. I'm writing down, for example, Louisiana. I'm like, well, that one got away, so that's another win, one that should have been a win. And then I'm looking Coastal Carolina. Well, hell, if you don't turn it over 5 times, that one probably could have been a win. And I start to look at those things, and you're like, early in the season, if we play Missouri State later in the season, and it's just one of those odd out of conference mid to late season games, Marshall probably wins that game too, because Lorcan Quinn is clicking by that time. And that was just one of those weird things that he was still trying to find his groove. Of course, we've said it over and over. You can't blame just one player and one play on any win or loss. But when you lose by 1 and you miss a close field goal, it's just really easy to point to that. But that kid was phenomenal. So I look at this and I go, man, we really let 4, maybe 5 games slip away. Mm-hmm. And this could be a really different tune if you make a play here and a play there. I mean, Marshall was really close to being a 8-win ball club, maybe. And I mean, that's maybe more than that, maybe a 9-win ball club. But that's the difference in veteran teams that have played for a while together. They win those close games more often than not. But that's all right. It's all part of growing pains. It's all part of the new era. This is still year 1, and it's very much a learning experience for Gibson and this coaching staff. And a lot of these players were acclimating to Huntington, so I'm not trying to make excuses, but that's truth. That is exactly what was happening. So 5-7, nobody's ever going to be happy with that in Huntington, ever, nor should you be. But I know we'll get into it more, but it really feels like, and it still holds true, you're 15 plays away from being maybe a 9-win ball club or better. But let's talk about the offense, and I'd like to. I don't know really where to start with this, because I could sit here and talk about, this guy led the team in this category and this guy led the team in this category, but I'm not sure that is the best way to do it. I mean, we can, but how do you feel?
I can tell you,
do you want to just dive into analytical stats and see what happens with this conversation?
Everything that I have, if this helps you any, is all team stats. I don't have anything about individuals. We can talk about as many individuals, but I did not exhaust and write down every single thing until you get down to they were the only one of one player, like the kicker and the punter. Everything else is strictly, even the quarterbacks, it's a conglomerate of all their stats. It's how the team did.
Well, okay, that's fine, but I have some individual stats, because I think it's also important to give the guys their shine that really had great seasons for Marshall, both offensively, defensively, and special teams. But I guess the biggest stat that you got to point at when you look at this offense is how many points did they score across the whole season and on a per game average. And Marshall scored 369 points this season. That was good enough for 30.8 points per game. And generally, that 30-point plateau will win you a lot of ball games. It didn't win Marshall enough ball games. And you're thinking, well, how many did they give up? And we'll talk about that in defense. It was close, but by the thinnest of margins, Marshall's offense outscored what the defense was allowing. But, it's a play here and a play there that in certain games it keeps that from happening. So let's talk about what the team as a whole did, and let's see where this conversation takes us.
All right, so I had scoring, like you said, 30.8 points a game. That was tied for 43rd in the country, just under that that quad one, the top 25%. So you've got rushing, 197 yards a game, 21st in the country, 23 touchdowns on the ground, tied for 49th in the country, 4.72 yards per carry, tied for 40th in the country. So rushing, all of those are really good. You're looking at 49th is the lowest of those rankings. Passing, 207.9, that's 90th. 18 touchdowns through the air, tied for 66th. And 7.4 yards per attempt, tied for 60. The mix was we had 59.9% of the time we ran the ball. 40.1% then we passed the ball. So nearly 60-40 rush to pass ratio. However, production side, 48.7% of our yards came from rushing, whereas 51.3 came from passing. So we were actually more efficient through the air, but you always are going to pass for more yards than you're going to run per attempt. No one in the country is going to average 8-9 rush yards every time they carry it. But that's a good stopping point for now. Now I've got more, but that shows you what we did. Total rushing, total 404.9 yards when you combine rushing and passing, 49th in the country. So offense, everything looks really good except for passing yards per game. And as you know, against Georgia and then against Missouri State, when we did not have Carlos Del Rio-Wilson in yet, we were coming from way behind. I think we were in the 130 to 136, the bottom 5 to 10 definitely in the country, and we shot up as the season went on. But offense overall, when you look at that rank, that's all numbers that you could probably live with.
Yeah, they're not anything that makes you like throw up in your mouth a little bit. We expected to see a top rushing offense based on what we knew about Rod Smith, Rod McDowell, and what they had done at Jack State. We tossed around some big gaudy numbers in the preseason about what they had done at previous stops. And I think you could ask both of those guys, and they would say, I feel like we underperformed. I'm sure that's what they feel like they would say, because you're only gaining 2,566 rush yards gained, but you lost 202 yards probably off of sacks and plays, negative plays, things like that. So you net 2,364 yards, and we're talking about nearly 1,000 yards more, if not 1,000 yards more, that we had seen them produce at previous stops. I'm not saying that that's what's got to happen here, but boy, you could really start to imagine what the record might look like, what the point totals might look like if you're pushing up another 800 yards, just 700 yards, 650, getting to that 3,000 rush yard plateau. I think you're seeing a different story right now. One of the things that you mentioned was how many points came off of rushing yards versus passing yards. And then, of course, the big one that sticks out to me is without looking at this, I expected Marshall to be over a 5-yard per carry team. I just did. It just felt like that. So it was a little shocking to see that they were sub 5 yards a carry. And you also mentioned, like I said, the points off of rush yards. I felt like that would be a higher percentage, but it just shows me that I guess it tells me that we lacked a little bit of prowess in the red zone at times, and we lacked those game-breaking chunk rush plays that other teams seem to get against us more often. Now, we had some, but not as much as we allowed this year.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I did the percent of yards, not the percent of points.
Okay.
But yeah, it's 60-40 rush to pass, and then 49 to 51 rush to pass as far as yard production. But points, we actually did rush for more than we threw. We had 23 touchdowns on the ground, 18 through the air.
Okay. So still very livable rush yardage, and that speaks to a stable of running backs that, let's face it, in the preseason we knew nothing about. We knew nothing about most of these guys other than what their stats were at previous stops. The only guy I believe that had any type of playing time at all for Marshall was Antoine Roberts, and we overlooked him quite a bit in the position group breakdown series for the Herd.
He was coming off that knee injury.
Yeah, and it wasn't on purpose. It was just like we were stuck talking about transfers, and we just really didn't think to talk about him because he was coming off an injury. But the job that they did bringing in the talent that they did, which was allowed Marshall to weather some injuries, which we did throughout the season, and still be able to be productive game in and game out, is really nice. It was not until the very last game of the season where I felt like, what the hell? This was supposed to be the one where you go crazy, and you didn't go crazy. When you talk about the passing game, though, that was perhaps the bigger question mark. We thought we were coming in with some pretty talented runners, some guys we knew were going to gain some yards, make some plays, look really good doing it. But it was the passing that we really didn't know anything. Would we have one pass attempt coming in from the spring? But wasn't that what it was? It was something crazy like that. I don't recall, but I remember it being something wild, like one actual passing attempt amongst our top three quarterbacks.
I don't think we had any. I don't think Ja'Kai Long, who was the only one returning, I don't think he had any passing attempts in 2024.
No, he didn't. But I think Zion might have had one at Jack State or something like that.
I thought you meant for Marshall.
No. I mean, as a group,
he had like four, I think. Okay. Was all 4 passing attempts. Yeah. but no, we had 0 production returning from Marshall.
Correct. Yeah. So that was the bigger question mark. How was it going to look, and what were they going to do? And even after 2 weeks, it was kind of like, uh-oh. It's like, what are we going to do? And you didn't really expect to see much from Georgia. You wanted to see a little bit of a pulse and that you were there to compete. But I think the bigger letdown was the home opener against Missouri State. And you're like, man, it can't be like this. Like, we got to be a little bit better than this. And enter Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, and he just got better and better from like weeks 3 through about 7 or something. And then it started to plateau off. And then he had another great game at Georgia State, and then it kind of went downhill for the last couple. But what are your overall thoughts, though, on the passing game? Like, when you look back and you think about watching the games and being there in person and, that whole kind of thing, like when you sit back and think about it as a whole, I mean, I don't even know how do you describe it?
So I describe it a mix of a pleasant surprise as the season went on and a big disappointment because of some of the weapons. I feel underutilized, some of our wideouts. Floyd Lacey is as great as some of the games that he had. You would expect more, targets his way. Definitely Toby Payne. You guys talked, or you guys, me included, you and I talked about Toby Payne and how he was underutilized, and they need to get him in the offense on those mismatches, help stretch the field and everything. And then you got later on in the season, Norton and Tamarez that came on at different times. And you're sitting here thinking, okay, we've got 3+ wide receivers that have shown good production. And then you've got a tight end that won the best tight end in the Sun Belt, basically getting on the first team. And you're like, I think we could have done a lot more in our passing game. So it seemed both competent and a disappointment for me at the same time.
So the top 4 receivers, I'm going to talk a little bit of individual stuff right now. The top 4 receivers this year played in all 12 games. All 4 of those guys played in all 12 games. Of course, Floyd Lacey led the team in catches, yards, and tied for first with touchdown receptions. He had the longest play of the season as well, receiving play as well. Floyd goes 65 catches for 769 yards and 5 touchdowns with a long of 68, averaging just over 64 yards a game. And believe it or not, Toby Payne, as underutilized as he was, and we all saw it, was the second leading receiver in receptions, but the third leading receiver in yardage which also isn't very surprising. I mean, you expect a wideout to have a bigger per catch average. So Toby Payne goes 36 catches for 387 yards and 3 touchdowns with a long of 48. And if you remember in the preseason position group breakdown series, I said I felt like he could be a 40 reception guy, 400 yards and half a dozen touchdowns. Well, and I'll be damned if he wasn't really close to that. And I still feel like he was underutilized. I feel like based on what I saw this year, that Payne should have been a 55 catch tight end in a lot of these games where he could have really helped open things up. I think he could have been pushing easily over 500 yards and probably gotten closer to that half a dozen touchdown mark, but he was only averaging 32 receiving yards a game. And then Tamarez ends up being third on the team in receptions with 32, second on the team in yardage with 395, 2 touchdowns through the air. And then Norton is your fourth leading receiver with 27 catches, 363 yards, and 5 touchdowns with a long of 41. So not too bad. It starts to trickle down after that. Guys missing time, guys not have. Michael Allen's your number 5 guy. He only played in 8 games this year. Ben Turner's your number 6 guy. XTB's your number 7 guy. Turner only played in 10 games. XTB was widely used on special teams, not as much in the receiving game. So those top 4 guys really did all of the heavy lifting for CDRW and this pass game. But some of them will return. We'll talk about that, not in this episode per se, but much farther down the line when we're talking recruiting. The only one that we will not see back is Floyd Lacey, and that's because he exhausted eligibility. He couldn't come back even if he wanted to. But having your 2, 3, 4 wide receivers set to return is a big lift to this pass game. What do you want to talk about next, man?
Let's talk about a hot button item that we talked about for the majority of the year, and that was the number of runs by the quarterback, specifically when Carlos Del Rio-Wilson was in the game and as our starter. I've got some maybe eye-opening things here. Percent of quarterback runs, this is with sacks removed. So that doesn't count as a rush, and the yards are also not there. Here is the percentage of our total plays. 21.1% of the time a quarterback ran it out of all of our plays. Total rushes, this is only when we're rushing the ball, again, not counting getting sacked. 36.5% of the times we attempted a rush, it was via the quarterback. This is all 3 quarterbacks that played, by the way. Now, individually, Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, when he had the ball, 36.3% of the time he rushed the ball. The other times, the 63.7% of the times includes him throwing the ball and handing it off to somebody else. 36.3% of the time that he was behind center, he rushed the ball. When Zion Turner was in, it was 24.4%. When Long was in, it was 37.9%. But with Long, he was brought in a couple of times via injury, has a much lower sample size than the other 2. So he came in to do a lot of quarterback runs instead of throwing the ball down the field. Real quick, same deal, but this is percent of yards in that same category. So 18.4% of our yards came from a quarterback rush. Remember, we ran it 21.1% of the time. Total rushes, out of all the yards that we got, 37.1 of them came from a quarterback run. And then individually, Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, 26% of his total yards came from rushing, 25.2 for Zion Turner, and a whopping 62.7% of the total yards that Ja'Kai Long had came from rushing. But again, much lower sample size, design plays for him in a quick, hey, we got to get Carlos back in. He's out limping, getting taped up, that sort of thing. But I thought that was a decent look in an eye-popping 21.1% of our overall plays was a quarterback run this year.
Yeah, that's a huge number to me. And looking at the overall leaders in rushing this year, of course, CDRW is your number 1 overall leader, and it's not even close, especially in an attempts category. But then your second and third quarterbacks rank all the way down there at your number 7 and number 8. So that really tells you how much abuse that CDRW took, how many carries he had, and how many hits he subjected himself to. But there's no denying it was a huge part of his game, and there's no bigger indicator to that than the very last game of the season when he was not able to be nearly as mobile as he needed to be effective. But still, he was the leader in rushing yards this year. He had attempts, 160 attempts, official attempts this year. Your number 2 and number 3 rushers overall, which Antoine Roberts is your number 2 rusher and Michael Allen is your number 3 leading rusher. Both of those guys combined rushed the ball for 167 attempts. So just 7 more attempts from 2 running backs versus your quarterback. The CDRW gained 749 yards, but lost 89 on sacks. So he netted 660 yards. He had 6 touchdowns on the ground. But that is such a huge stat. And we had all these guys that we talked about being able to carry the load a little bit and being able to weather injuries and stuff. And you start to look at this stuff and you wonder, like, man, there was one running back out of the top 5 that gave us meaningful yardage, that played in every game. One guy, and that was Antoine Roberts. Yeah. Michael Allen only accounted for 8 games. Joan Barbie only had 9 games. And Justin Williams-Thomas also only had 9 games. Now, Floyd Lacey was your 6th leading rusher, and he played in all 12 games as well. But from a running back room standpoint, it just tells you how easy it is to get dinged up. It's utterly amazing that CDRW was able to play as long as he did and as good as he did, knowing full well he was hurt. Could you only imagine if he was able to remain like at 90% all of the year instead of, kind of letting those hits catch up to him there at the end. But Antoine Roberts, of course, I gotta mention these guys. I got to give them their love. Was the leading rusher this year from a running back standpoint, 90 carries for 535 yards total, netted 512. Good for 5.7 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. They really spread the love from the touchdown standpoint against the runners this year. CDRW gets 6 on the ground. Roberts gets 4. Allen gets 4. Barbie gets 5. And Justin Williams-Thomas gets 2. Surprisingly, though, as electric as Floyd Lacey was, he did not have a rushing touchdown this year. Came close a couple times. It's like tripped up in a shoelace tackle type deal. But that, if you would have asked me that beforehand, I would have been like, of course he got one. I remember the play. But no, it did not happen. But overall, I think you're going to need to see 2,364 net rush yards get bumped up as you move into 2026. If this is what the bread and butter truly is going to be for this offense moving forward, and if we do not see any type of staff change, any type of philosophy change, scheme change, no change, then you're gonna have to see probably 20 to 30% more production out of this running unit to try to get you to that, to account for another game or 2 in the win column alone, just from rushing production. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I feel the same way. I also want to say that because of us being dinged up at different times at running back, I think that some of them, even though they had games played, they were nowhere near the 100%, maybe not even 70%. I don't know. But we, for instance, Joan Barbie, when he came back, they used him in the power situations, when you had to get a touchdown, that late in the game. But we did not see him really get the carries in the breakaway situations. And it felt like, well, he's not back to 100%, so they're not going to put him in a situation where he could further injure himself or not get back to 100%. But there were others in that same situation. Michael Allen, went out for several weeks. And when he came back, it seemed like he was in there, but just not anywhere near a full workload. So I felt like that there were some nagging injuries that even when they came into play, they had to rely on next man up and that person be the more featured back. But some of those times, the featured back was the quarterback run, and they just clearly outshined. I don't have the game in front of me, but I vividly remember talking about Carlos Del Rio-Wilson having more rush attempts than all the other running backs that rushed in that game combined. Not individually, but each and every one of them combined, he had more.
Yeah. And honestly, when you again, another thing to think about with this is Antoine Roberts ends up being your leading rusher in the running back room. And he played reserve duty for easily the first third of the season. And he gets a couple of starts and has a couple of great games, goes over $120, I think, for 2 straight games. And that gives him half of his yardage on the year. And that's enough to make him I don't want to say far and away, but it's close enough. He was 130 yards better than the number 3 rusher, which was Mike Allen, and almost nearly 270 yards better. So Barbie accounted for a total of 249 yards on the year. So nearly, over double. 249, Roberts ends up with 512. So double the rushing total of the 4th leading rusher, but 3rd best running back. That just goes to show you that nobody was able to carry the load for the entire season effectively. You weren't having a guy push up around that 800, 900,000 yard kind of game. And of course, the quarterback takes a lot away from that. But still, this was a by committee thing. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be that, but still out of that, nobody really cemented their role as RB1 because it seems like as soon as they did, they got dinged up, So I don't know. What do you got left on the offense before we switch?
Offense, only a couple of things here. Sacks allowed, we gave up 19. That was tied for 41st in the country. Again, right close to that top 25%. 3rd down conversion percentage, 35.4%, 106th in the country. Talk about those real quick when you're looking at everything up here. Passing yards was the only one that was really lower. And then 3rd down conversion percentage lower. That seems to be dragging more of the offensive production down, maybe where we could have scored more points to get us up there a little bit better. And then the final thing that I have is red zone. I'm going to run through these really quick. 49 attempts overall, tied for 43rd. Scores, 40, tied for 55th. Conversion percentage, 81.6%, tied for 89th. But here's where it looks bad. The touchdown percentage, every time they got in the red zone, 55.1%. That was 103rd. Field goal percent, 26.5%, 43rd. So we got more 3s than we got 7s when we got down there. And again, you're talking about leaving points on the board. We were talking about a 30.8 scoring and how that was very, very similar to the defense on how much we gave up. Imagine picking up another 3 a game, what that would have done.
Yeah, it would have undoubtedly led to a couple of wins because you lose a couple of games by a point, 2 points, 3 points, those add up pretty quick. Last thing I want to do on offense before we switch to defense is I'm going to go back and let's talk about the position group breakdown and how right we were and did we miss the mark. I'm going to start with the offensive line and I'm going to talk about your breakout player. I don't know how to do this. If you want to talk about them or go who was the most right or who missed the mark, I think both of us are going to be pretty even on this. Your breakout player, if you recall, was Marcus Adams, and he had a pretty good season in his own right. There's nothing that leaps out to me to say that you were dead wrong about that. He was a solid, serviceable offensive lineman. He did his job, and he did it well. My breakout player this year was Eric Meeks, because he was going to be charged with continuing the lineage of really good center play at Marshall that we've been accustomed to seeing for a while. I'm not going to say that you were wrong, but I think that I was righter on this one because Eric was a phenomenal player this entire year and a really gutsy guy. We saw him Get the media availability a couple of times. You're featured in the 75-week video. I think that's a big deal. It should be a bigger deal than Marshall makes it right now. I hope we're speaking that into existence. Both of us agreed on the MVP of the unit. Do you recall who that was?
Slappy.
Jalen Slappy. And how do you feel about that, knowing what you know and what you saw?
Oh, 100%. We nailed it. I feel like he was the anchor of the offensive line. And, if you have to pick a quarterback for each position, he would be the quarterback for me for that offensive line.
Yeah, I feel good about that pick as well. Then you surprised me with the new one that we added this year, which was who's the sleeper pick? And I didn't have one because this was something we hadn't talked about. And you came out with Isaac Clary. How do you feel about that?
I feel like I thought we were going to see him a lot more. I loved his athleticism, playing basketball and all the different stuff and the size and just immense strength that he has. And I hope that he takes that step up next year, but we did not see him do enough this year for what I would call, I got that one right.
So let's do this then. Who would you say ended up being the sleeper?
Christian Richter.
It's a good choice. I was kind of torn between Richter and Montgomery, and
he was my second.
Yeah, so that's a good pick as well. I think this will be really the fun thing is like who ended up being the sleeper that was not even on our radar. But that's a good pick. I can't go wrong. I would say Christian Richter or Montgomery is got to be the sleeper. Both the other guys that we talked about, three, Slappy, Meeks, and Adams, we kind of nailed. Let's move to the wide receiver / tight end room. Your breakout player this year, even though he had already been productive, was Toby Payne. Mine was a freshman that we were really high on based off of spring practice and spring ball and did not see much, if any, of the field, and that was Deuce White. So you nailed that one, and I did not. But how do you feel now that we know what the statistics were for Toby? Did he break out enough for you to be considered a breakout year, even though he was still a first-team All-SBC selection?
No, if I had to give a breakout, it would have been to Lacey, for the way that he did. But I felt like the underutilization of the mismatches with Toby. I mean, I expected him to have some much more gaudy stats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too. And I agree with, I think Floyd would have been the breakout player knowing what we know now. Your MVP of the unit was Adrian Norton. I chose Toby Payne, and I can't say that I'm wrong because he was a first-team All-SBC selection, very integral in the run blocking and pass blocking game and made plays through the air as well when they needed him. But, man, Norton did not have as big of a role in this offense as I thought we would see. He was the guy that had done it and had done it at this level and was a second-team All-MAC performer. Still made fantabulous catches this year, circus catches, electric catches for touchdown. But I think Toby Payne was a bigger MVP of those respective units than Norton was. Do you recall your sleepers?
Did I say Antonio Harmon?
You did not. That was your most excited to see, as was mine. Your sleeper pick was smack dab, nailed it. You had two, I had two. The first one you nailed. It was Floyd Lacey. And the second one was, again, Deuce White. Deuce White was a guy that I picked as well as my sleeper. My second sleeper, though, I gave a little bit of love to Xavier Turner-Bradshaw. And even though he didn't make a lot of noise in the receiving game, he made a little bit of noise in the return game, but that's not special teams. So who would you said, is Floyd still your sleeper pick, or are you sticking? I don't know how you want to quantify that. He was undoubtedly the breakout, undoubtedly the MVP of the wide receivers, but who would you say would have been the sleeper now?
I would have said Tamarez, I think.
Yeah.
That just because he was coming up and I thought he was going to be behind Norton, I thought he was going to be behind Harmon, who I thought was going to do a lot more. I would have given the MVP to Lacey, the sleeper to Tamarez.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. Tamarez was the guy that I thought of as well. He really came on and was pretty consistent throughout the season once he came on. and he was the sleeper. I think he came from Western Carolina. So he had a little bit of experience, had some statistics. I think he was one of the guys that had a better statistics coming in than our number one wide receiver from 24. So it wasn't at all completely surprising, but still, he was a very pleasant surprise. And so far, a guy that plans to return for 2026. Running backs now. You were most excited to see Justin Williams-Thomas. I was most excited to see Joshon Barbie. I still don't think either of those are wrong picks because both guys were very exciting to watch at times throughout this season. Do you recall your breakout player?
I think Barbie, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was. You chose Joshon Barbie. I chose Tony Mathis because I thought it was a show me season for him. He was a senior. I figured he wanted to come in here and have a breakout year, and he just did not see the field very often. And Barbie was easily the bigger breakout player of those two guys. The overall MVP of the unit, you chose Justin Williams-Thomas. I chose Joshon Barbie. It turned out to be that neither one of us were correct. I think the MVP of the unit would have been the guy that we didn't talk about that much, would have been Antoine Roberts, or maybe Michael Allen, because he also threw in the receiving element in there. But, we really didn't talk about Antoine that much. Who was do you remember your sleeper pick?
Was it Michael Allen?
It was Michael Allen, and my sleeper was Justin Williams-Thomas. I would have to say that you had the better pick there. He was far more productive, of the number 3 leading rusher, and played and very, very useful in the pass game. Would you say that would he still be your sleeper pick? I put it that way.
I don't know. I don't know that there is someone that you could say this is a sleeper. I think maybe Justin Williams-Thomas, because he had less carries. And when he came in, for the longest time, he was leading, and I don't have him in front of me, but the yards per carry, he was just dominating other people. Don't know.
Yeah, I think that what we picked was fine. Michael Allen was a great pick as a sleeper because we didn't have him as a breakout player. We didn't have him as an MVP of the unit. And he kind of came out of nowhere, because he had a shortened season at UNLV the year before. And we didn't know what we were going to get. He was productive in the handful of games he played at UNLV, but still, that's a long time to go without playing contact football. So you don't know if it would translate, and it did. Last one was the quarterback, and we were both most excited to see Carlos Del Rio Wilson, and I still stand by that. The proof was in the pudding on that one as the way the season went. Your breakout player was Ja'Kai Long. Mine was CDRW. I think CDRW proved to be the breakout player this year. The MVP of the unit you chose was CDRW, and this was my biggest cop-out to date. I had said whichever quarterback gets the most snaps has to be the MVP of the unit, which turned out to be Del Rio Wilson. But you nailed it out of the gate, right? I mean, it's like you have to. If you're playing the lion's share of the season and you're stinking it up, man, we're in for a long season.
Yeah.
But you nailed it out of the gate. My sleeper pick for the quarterback was Ja'Kai Long. He ended up being the game 1 starter, which was pretty cool. Your sleeper was Zion Turner. Ended up being the second game starter and almost bringing the herd back in that finale to get the win and become bowl eligible. How do you feel about that still? You think he was a good sleeper pick?
Yeah, I feel like when you look at Ja'Kai's number of carries and number of attempts, and you look at Turner obviously had a bigger sandbox to play in, I guess you would say. His stats, are a lot better to look at and break down because he had more of them. So I would say he was probably the sleeper because he came in, and especially after that week 2 game where he lost the job to Carlos Del Rio Wilson, he still had the most meaningful play after that. Even though Ja'Kai Long was first off the bench when there was an injury and things earlier in the season, when you get to App State and when you get to Georgia Southern, it was Zion Turner that came in, and he played well in those 2 games that he came in. So I would have to say, other than his play at Missouri State, he had some really good drives and meaningful time in those other 3 games that he got a lot of playing time.
Yeah, I would say without a doubt, Turner ended up being the better sleeper pick than Long. Both guys appeared in 5 games, by the way. And, Turner ended up passing for a little over 400 yards. He had a touchdown. He also had an interception. And he rushed the ball for 129 yards. He had a pretty good year. Ja'Kai Long it was a big fall off after Turner in both rushing, team-wise, and passing, obviously, because Turner was your number 7 rusher, Long was your number 8 rusher, and it goes all the way down from 129 to 38 yards. And, of course, Ja'Kai Long only went 6 of 18 on the season for 31 yards. But let's switch sides now. Let's talk defense. I told you earlier that it was the slimmest of margins for points per game scored versus points allowed. Marshall scored 30.8 points per game. They allowed 30.3 points per game. And, well, a half a point didn't do enough to get you that extra win throughout the season. So lay on me what you got for defense.
All right. Scoring, you mentioned, that was tied for 107th in the country. Rushing, 148.9 per game, 68th in the country, rushing defense. We gave up 21 touchdowns on the ground. That's tied for 83rd in the country. Passing, we gave up 261.7. That is 127 out of 136. 24 touchdowns through the air, tied for 122nd in the country. Total yards, 410.6 for 109th in the country. Real quick, I just want to say one of the things that we hear all the time, I've read ad nauseum, is we have to get rid of this 3-3-5, KD. We got to get rid of the 3-3-5. The 3-3-5 is not good. The 3-3-5 will not work at this level. And the reasoning usually is the 3-3-5, we only have 3 down linemen, and you can't stop the run in a 3-3-5. We were 68th in the country against the rush and 127th in the country against the pass. That's all I'm going to say for now. I got more thoughts on that later.
Yeah, I don't think my biggest beef with the 3-3-5 is not being able to stop the run. I think it's not being able to get to the quarterback as often as you need to try to bring down some of that pass yardage. And I think some of that also falls on the guys on the back end of the field. In the secondary, they were consistently kind of not where they needed to be. We gave up way too many big, long pass plays. It was the story of the season. It was the story of the season. And I mean, if you've got stats, cool, but I think people know game in and game out that we gave up long touchdowns, 80-yard touchdowns and chunk plays through the air.
Yeah, we got stats, and it's not to counter attack anything you just said. It's to reinforce what you just said. Chunk plays by yardage. These are 20 plus, 30 plus. And if you had a 70 plus yarder that you gave up, well, that's going to count as a 20 plus, a 30 plus, and so on until you get to that 7. So just for everyone listening and watching at home, 20 plus plays, we gave up 62 of them. It was tied for 112th in the country. KD, that was the best that you're going to hear for the next minute. 30 plus, 34 of them, tied for 129th. 40 plus, 23rd of them, dead last at 136th in the country. 23 different 40 plus yards, worst in the country. 50-yard plus plays, 12 of them, tied for 132. 60 plus, 7 of them, tied for 127th. 70 plus, 5 of them tied for 135th. If you're tied for 135th, you're still dead last.
You're last.
80 plus, 2 tied for 126th, and 90 plus, 1, and you're tied for 125th. If you've got 1 and you're tied for 125th,
you're last.
You're dead last. So we were dead last in 3 of those categories, and other than that, 112, which is not good, mind you. No. It is not good. It's all bottom quartile, last 25% of the teams. We were in the 125, 126, 127, 132, 135, 136, with 3 of those being dead last in the country. So now let's talk about what and there's more to this in just a second. 68th in the country against the rush, 127th against the pass, and all these chunk plays here making us keep in mind these are rushes and passes for these chunk plays. The 90-yarder was a 92-yard Georgia State rush for a touchdown. So it paints a little bit of a picture here that we were worse against the pass. We were worse against giving up the big play, rush or through the air. The defensive backs were worse than the defensive line as far as this production looks when you're looking at stopping the run versus stopping the pass.
Yeah. And of course it's kind of easy to say that, but without knowing and looking at the exact film of the exact plays and knowing whose responsibility it was for what. But it's really easy to say, well, you gave up all these through the air, so obviously the run defense did a better job than the pass defense.
That's all I'm saying.
I think every fan that had an ass in a seat would be like, yeah, no kidding, because we got burned far too often and it was optically bad a lot of the times. That's my biggest beef with a 3-3-5. I need to be able to have an extra guy on that first line of defense to be able to maybe put more pressure on a quarterback and make them more uncomfortable in order to not potentially hit more of those long passes.
Let me hit you with these stats.
Okay.
This talks a little bit about pressure and production up front, but it's also is going to include your linebackers and your defensive backs.
Okay.
Sacks, 28, tied for 40th in the country. We did a really good job. Mm-hmm. Tackles for loss, 78, tied for 26th in the country. That's top quartile. Interceptions, 13, tied for 20th in the country, top quartile. Forced fumbles, 10, tied for 32nd, top quartile. Fumble recoveries, 8, tied for 27th, top quartile. We nailed it in just about everything except for chunk plays. Mm-hmm. And the passing yards, which again is coming from the chunk plays, and you take away some of these rushes, the rushing thing goes down a lot more. That 92-yarder, if you took that away, our yards are going to go down, So it to me is painting a picture that the 3-3-5, everything that I've heard, and I'm not picking on you because you do make a good point about the pressure and everything, but tackles for loss, we were 26th in the country. Sacks, we were 40th in the country. I know that you and I can both pick out 2 to 3 more quarterback hurries where we almost got the guy and the guy got away per game, So I think the pressure was there. The pressure looked like it wasn't there as much because of the big plays that were coming out from the missed tackles, the missed assignments in the defensive backfield and those big plays that torched us. So I do think, I'm not saying that we should always be in a 3-3-5. I do think that the perception and the reality are slightly askew, but I do think that if we had more packages that we modified it into a 4-2-5, and instead we still have the 5 defensive backs, you still have everything, but you take that outside linebacker that would be more of a hybrid instead of outside linebacker and safety, make him more of an outside linebacker edge, and you can put him up. If you remember, Mike Green was an outside linebacker before he came here. So having someone like that you could put, and all of a sudden you're shifting into a 4-2-5, and you don't have to change personnel, to sub in, and you can put that guy down at the edge, slide everybody else over. I think that would be my hope, my desire. But when I read a lot of, well, the 3-3-5 is not good because you can't stop the run. We didn't kill it in the run, but we were exactly half. 68 is exactly half of 136. You take away some of those big plays once they got into the past the line of scrimmage, and they break out those 40-yard runs, those 30-yard runs because of missed tackles. on the outside and in the open field. I think that the rush defense gets a little bit better. Right now, everything that was wrong with our defense was the chunk play. And that's not just the defensive backs. It goes on the linebackers as well. It goes on those missed tackles at the defensive line sometimes. But the chunk plays by far was the thing that killed us. I maintain, by looking at this, and there's a little bit more stats for defense to go over later, not much, but I maintain that we could have seen a full touchdown per game that we gave up due to either a missed assignment or poor tackling with a bad angle or not wrapping up or whatever the tackle was. And when you're talking about going from scoring was 107th in the country, tied for 107th at 30.3. If you knock that down to 23.3, take a full touchdown off per game. I know that's a big ask, but when you go back and you say in that game's like, oh yeah, we missed that one. That shouldn't have been a touchdown. Oh yeah, we missed that one. It's not too far off when you look at these big chunk plays. 23.3, by the way, that wins you a lot more games when you're scoring 30.8, but it also would have been good for somewhere in the 50s for where you would have been defensive scoring. So to me, chunk plays, huge killer, by far the biggest of the season.
Yeah, and when you were talking about ripping off all those turnover stats, Marshall ranked really high in, tackles for loss and sacks and interceptions and all that. The problem with that is those don't immediately offset a chunk play touchdown, right? Like twice it did, or 3 times it did. Boogie took a couple to the house, Hudson took one to the house, right? But most of the time, you're not trading. You're trading yards for points. That's it. Or you're trading a drive for easy points later. So while that looks really, really good, and you could say, wow, the 3-3-5 really creates a lot of turnovers. Maybe it does. Maybe it's a byproduct of it. I don't know. Maybe we just had a really good year of creating turnovers. But what it didn't do this year was match easy points for easy points. So we gave up way too many and didn't recoup that on the defensive side of the ball. And then when you couple that with a sputtering offense, it gets away from you.
Yeah. However, and not a rebuttal to you, but an addition to this, I had a lot of people that I saw social media wise say the 3-3-5, like we were the only one in the country that ran it. Like, Gibson was the guy, so that was the only person. And then many of the matchups, when I had the people on from the other pod during that Getting to Know series, I'd say, what kind of defense do you run? And close to half of them said 3-3-5, and they immediately said, we get a lot of pressure out of our 3-3-5 because we get good coverage in the back, and that allows us just that extra half second. If you remember, we talked about that a lot in the 4-2-5 and the 4-3 that we ran the 2 seasons prior to this, that it gave our defensive line or our linebackers just another half second. And that allowed us to get back for either a quarterback hurry or a sack. And we have been getting 35-plus sacks because you know that I had this idea that I wanted to do with fundraising and sacks, and I hope we can do it next year. 28 is the lowest we've had in a while. So no, I don't think that it necessarily is getting us a lot of pressure, but there were a lot of teams that ran a 3-3-5 and they did not give up the chunk plays that we did because we were dead last. Right. And there were some 4-3s, there were some 3-4s, and there were some 4-2-5s, and anything else that you want to look at that were right there with us in the chunk plays mixed in. It wasn't like every 3-3-5 was the bottom 7. It wasn't like every 3-3-5 did great against the rush and bad against the pass. This looked like an outmatch in personnel without picking on anybody individually. Just as a group, the defensive backs gave up more chunk plays due to missed tackles, or they gave up more chunk plays due to mismatched coverage. And that looks to be what happened here with this defense this year. Because everything else, stats-wise, you're like, man, that's acceptable to that's very good.
Yeah. And we saw that play out. So it's not about calling anybody out. How many times did we hear an announcer say they're not even throwing at Trotter, they're picking on whoever else, and that we saw that play out. So that's not an unfair statement. That's exactly what happened. And that's what coaches picked on. So then you have to ask yourself, is it a personnel problem? Is it a communication problem? Is it a coaching problem? Or is it a little bit of everything? And what's the easiest to fix? Right. Well, right. But then at that point, what's the easiest one to take care of? Is it, because I find it hard to believe that you just automatically go out and get better players, because, you would just do that. Right. So there's something else that's going to have to be fixed. That's got to be easier to fix. And some of these guys, I don't want to see them go anyway. Trotter's exhausted eligibility. He's not going to be back. Marvin Myers exhausted eligibility. McKnight exhausted eligibility. Cam Smith, I believe, was a senior, and he won't be back. So you're looking at a rebuilt secondary, pretty much from bottom to top, or top to bottom. Daryl Sweeting announced the other day he's coming back, so that'll be a nice little addition to
Caleb Clark Glover is coming back,
right? And
Louis Kinsey Jules,
maybe. Yeah, I mean, some of these guys haven't announced whether they're staying or going, so we don't know. I'm just talking about the couple of guys that have said, "Yeah, I'm back. I've got unfinished business." And so you're still looking at losing some of your top secondary talent, but I don't want to sound I don't want to sound mean, but that might not be a terrible thing because of the exposure to these chunk plays. But that's above my pay grade.
It just did not work, right?
It did not work.
I think that's the easiest way to say it, is we are only pointing out what was here. We can't sit here and say, hey, they had collectively as a group, they had a great year, because the stats show that was not true.
Yeah, the stats show that they did not.
But the thing that I keep hearing, and I'm going back to this, and this is full circle, is we got to get out of this 3-3-5. Now, I have seen people say a 4-3, but a lot of people said we should have kept the same defense we had last year. It was so much better. It was a 4-2-5. In that situation, even though some of the play calls, some of the responsibilities may change slightly, you're still looking at 5 defensive backs.
Yeah.
And we just said those 5 defensive backs as a group did not do what was needed to be done. So 4-2-5, it's going to change maybe a little bit on the pressure up front, maybe a little bit on the run, but you're still going to have those throws over the top that we did not do a good job of defending.
Yeah. I mean, and at that point, who are you comfortable taking off of the field from the linebacking unit? Because a lot of those guys were, Jiminy Christmas, they were playing with their hair on fire, guys like Alameen. I mean, he was great once he started becoming more of a rotational player. Carryon Martin was great, in that line. Who do you take? A Gilmore was really great. So who do you start to take off, when you go down to 2? Let's talk about the position group breakdown thing, and we'll revisit those, and then we'll talk about special teams. So going through the defensive line, you were most excited to see the duo of Jacarius Clayton and Braden Ward. Clayton got dinged up towards the end of the year. Braden Ward had a really good year. And I was most excited to see the legacy player, the big man in the interior. Well, sometimes Jamal Weiss Jr. And I still stand by that. I think he had a really great year. And as did Ward. Clayton could have had, it's not his fault. He got hurt, so nothing wrong with that. Both of us matched on our breakout player. Do you recall who that was?
Katron Evans.
No, sir. We both thought Braden Ward was going to be the breakout player this year. And I don't know that I feel wrong in saying he had a breakout year. He established himself as the next edge rusher at Marshall. And, of course, it's really, really, really hard to follow up what Mike Green did.
Yeah, so where I'm at on that was I actually expected a little bit more out of the stats from Braden Ward, and I think it was not a play situation. It was a personnel situation that he was not on the field as much in this 3-3-5. So that was that was one of those that I say, yeah, he did good. Yeah, he stepped it up and broke out, but I expected the breakout to be a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And he goes way down the line as far as overall production. He is the team's leading quarterback sacker. He had 4. Just a half a sack behind him, though, was Paul Hudson III. And Paul had way more of a production line than Braden Ward had. Braden appeared in all 12 games as well. He only tallied 16 total tackles on the year. 7 of those were solo. He had 5.5 tackles for loss and 4 of those sacks. But not bad. It's a pretty decent breakout year. We were excited about the athleticism. We were also excited about the rawness and what would that turn into this year. I think moving forward, if he remains with the herd, maybe next year, maybe 2026 will be the true breakout year for Braden Ward. But he had a lot of flash this year. Again, felt really good about what he was able to do. Your MVP of the unit, do you recall?
Was that Katron Evans?
It was not. It was my MVP of the unit. Yours was the man next to him, Jamal Weiss Jr.
That's right.
Not a bad pick. Jamal ended up, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11th total tackler on the Herd's defense with 34 total. And 12 of those solo. He appeared in 11 of 12 games. He had 6 tackles for loss and tallied 3 sacks. Not too bad. He actually did better than Katron Evans, who also appeared in 11 games, had just 12 total tackles and 1.5 tackles for loss. So excellent pick as the MVP of the unit on the defensive line. But P3 was actually your defensive MVP this year. Who was do you recall your sleeper pick?
No, I think your sleeper pick was P3.
Well,
but
it was one of them.
Okay, but I'm sitting here. I can't remember. Was it Jacarius Clayton?
It was. We both went. We both were high on Jacarius Clayton coming in. I think injuries sidelined his season. He only appeared in 6 games. He only had 2 tackles on the year. But I also said, I don't know why, but this guy, Paul Hudson III, is leaping off the page for me, and I can't figure out why. And boy, was I right. This might be the most right that I was all year long on any of these position group breakdowns. P3 ended up being the 8th top tackler on the Herd with 40 total tackles, 12 of those solo. He played in all 12 games. He had 6.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 4 hurries, and of course, a defensive touchdown. So, man, great overall season from P3. This is a guy that I'm really going to be looking forward to in 2026. If he remains with the Herd, that would be awesome. It would be a
He's coming back.
Very big piece to this defense to build around.
He announced he's coming back.
Yeah, oh, that's right. I have that on my notes. Linebacking core. Man, it was almost a clean sweep for us there for a while. We were right out of the gate. Let's just talk about it. We were really stoked on Javay Gilmore and what he might mean to this Herd defense coming in with that 6'4", 235-pound SEC frame. He delivered. He became the Herd's 4th leading tackler this year. You and I had him both as our most excited to see and our breakout players. He was I guess Carry-On's probably a linebacker as well, but Javay Gilmore was 63 total tackles for the Herd, just 1 behind Carry-On Martin. And he had 24 solo tackles appearing in all 12 games. He had 11.5 tackles for loss, which led the Herd defense. And he had a sack and a half to go with 2 pass breakups and 8 quarterback hurries and a forced fumble. Great all-around season for Javay Gilmore. I would classify that as a breakout season. MVP of the unit is where we differed. You said Javay Gilmore, and I said I felt really good about Jabril Alameen. And you know what? Jabril Alameen ranked right behind Gilmore on the defensive production list. He tallied 56 total tackles in 12 games. 26 of those were solo. He had 5.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. to go along with 3 pass breakups, 4 quarterback hurries, and a forced fumble. Both of those guys were great in the second level for the Herd this year. Both of us chose the same sleeper. Do you remember who that was?
Was that Cannon Lewis?
It was Cannon Lewis. Yeah. Cannon Lewis came on strong early in the season, and it looked like he was going to continue getting better and better and better and better, and all of a sudden the reps kind of went away, and I don't know if there was some injury involved in there, but it does say he appeared in all 12 games for the Herd. He tallied 30 total tackles, 14 of those solo. He had a half a tackle for loss and half a sack on the season to go along with 2 quarterback hurries. This youngster has all the makings to be a really good linebacker, and maybe we needed to cut the teeth this year in live game speed action to really get the benefit next year. Imagine what a linebacking core is going to look like if Gilmore stays. Alameen's already said he's going to stay, and if Cannon Lewis takes that leap in development, this might be a really good top of the Sun Belt type linebacking core. Russ, we got one. What do I got? One more? DBs. Yeah, we got DBs to talk about. Both of us were most excited to see Boogie Trotter. We both picked Daryl Sweeting as our breakout players, and let's revisit that. How do you feel about that?
I don't think Sweeting.
He was the youngster of the group, wasn't he? Isn't he the sophomore or whatever?
Yeah, he was at Maryland, I think, before he came here. I don't think that he played as many downs as I would have classified somebody for the sleeper.
Well, let's see who else would have been above him.
By the way, real quick, Gilmore has already said that he's coming back as well.
Okay, well, good. So that's damn near everybody. Daryl Sweeting ranks 9th on this Herd defense in production from a tackle standpoint with 37 total tackles. 22 of those were solo, and he appeared in all 12 games. He had one tackle.
Stand corrected. I would count that as a sleeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's top 10 in production. Yeah. I think that's really good. One sack on the season, 1 interception as well. I think that's a really good season. Yeah. I think that's what I would call a breakout. Yeah, that's pretty good, man. MVP of the unit, you went with Marvay Myers, and I chose J.D. McKnight. Both guys had okay seasons. J.D. has the knack for just making the big interception at a certain clutch point in the season, but there were guys in the secondary that had far better seasons. I mean, Boogie Trotter led the team in tackles, in interceptions, in defensive touchdowns. He's by far the defensive MVP, and not far behind him was safety Cam Smith.
That's right.
So those two guys easily are far and away the defensive MVPs in the secondary, but Boogie even edges out Cam Smith. Yeah. Both of us had the same sleeper, and you had an honorable mention.
Lou Akinzie Jules was the honorable, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
No, he was actually your sleeper pick.
Okay. That's what I thought I just said.
No, you said your honorable mention.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But for sleeper. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Honorable mention.
You were sold on the size, man. That's what it was. You were sold on the size.
Oh, yeah. Daniel
Harris. Yeah.
Harris, yeah.
Yep, you were sold on the size of the 6'5" safety that ran a 4'4".
Yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out that Daryl Sweeting was probably the sleeper pick. Maybe Josh Pierre-Louis could have been the sleeper pick because he was also top 10 in production for this Herd defense overall. So a really good season for Josh Pierre-Louis. So I don't know, man. The youthful aspect of this secondary, there's a little promise there. You know, Caleb Clark Glover really played a better second half of the season, I would say. Really started making a name for himself. Sweeting did a little bit better as the season went. And of course, I always think back to guys like Chris Jackson from years ago, even Stephen Gilmore. I mean, these guys had rough roads as freshmen and sophomores, and man, it really paid dividends as in junior and senior years. They were great, but they had to take the hard way to get to that level of greatness. And they took their lumps, and maybe that's what we're seeing here. And, this season's over, so there's no need to dwell on that. We can look forward to what we can build off of for 2026 and beyond. Let's talk special teams real quick, and then we'll get out of here if you got something else.
Yeah, right before we do that, I just want to say for the defense, turnover margin was +6 on the season, tied for 30th, top quartile. And then the red zone we did not do as well. 46 attempts, 38 scores. Both of those were tied for 96, tied for 89. Conversion percentage, 82.6. That's tied for 58th. Touchdowns, we gave up a touchdown 60.9% of the time that the guys got in the red zone, tied for 79th. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. Field goal, we gave up one 21.7% of the time, tied for 52nd. I just wanted to throw those in, not any discussion about it.
Sure. Now let's switch gears. Let's talk special teams and hit me with the stats. And, man, I'm excited to talk about special teams.
Yeah, same here. Field goals attempted, 26. That was tied for 11th in the country for the most field goals attempted. Field goals made was 21st. That was tied for 13th in the country. The percentage of that was 80.8%, tied for 53rd. I think that's a good place. But I just want to say, to tie in, because our field goal kicker and extra points kicker was also the kickoff specialist, that he was second in the country for kickoffs and first in the country for percentage of kickoffs that went into the end zone, no return. And I think the only reason that he wasn't first in both was because he had one onside kick attempt, and that brought that down enough to where he got edged out by like tenths of a percentage or 1/10 of a percentage. So he was the best kickoff specialist in the country. Just wanted to pass that on along with these field goal stats.
Yeah, and right out of the gate, this is one that I think a lot of Herd fans are waiting with bated breath to see if he returns. And it's going to be really, really hard to keep a guy of his talent in Huntington. But there's a real NFL future there for Lorcan Quinn. And if he remains in Huntington, he's only got to play, hell, I don't even know if he's got to play another year. He's probably draft eligible now because he's well beyond 2 years since he graduated from high school.
Yeah.
So that might be the other element that you look at. It's not just transfer portal and who's going to pay you. He's probably draft eligible, and you would have to think there are a lot of NFL teams that are going to watch his film and go, holy shit, this guy's an absolute weapon, from a kickoff standpoint, from an extra point, from a field goal standpoint. Like, we can use this guy. But what a great pickup for Jackson White and this Herd special teams. We took some lumps in the preseason, in the portal cycle. Reese Verhoff transferred out, and all of a sudden we needed a kicker, and then we got a punter, and then, he portaled out after the spring cycle, and we thought, okay, and then Nathan Totten turned in a record-setting season for the Herd. These guys, I know we've said this a lot, but I hope Herd fans appreciated what they were watching in real time. And I know field goals and punting is not the sexiest thing to watch during a football game, but when you're the best all time at something, that deserves appreciation and accolade. And dude, we're going to talk about it because I continually believe we're in an era now to where records aren't going to fall. That you'll see maybe single season records fall, but all-time program records probably aren't going to fall that often. And Lorcan Quinn set an all-time program record. So that's pretty amazing stuff. What do you have anything? What else? What other kind of stats do you have here before? And you can lead the discussion.
Punting average 44.8%. I'm sorry, 44.8 yards. Tied for 33rd in the country. Punts per game 4.8, tied for 31st. You could look at that two ways. You can say he did great when he was punting. You can also say, wish we didn't punt as much, but he did an amazing job as well. They had no stats that I saw for how many inside the 20s. And as you and I talked several years ago, I said, our kicker was great when he had the opportunity to put one inside the 20. But if you're punting from your own 20-yard line, that's a tall ask to get him inside the 20. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we would have gotten much out of that stat anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not much we can say other than the fact that this was easily the best unit on the entire roster. The entire special teams phase of the game, even counting, 2 points and failed 2 points and punt return, kicker, all of it. This was easily, far and away, the best phase of the game for the Herd in 2025 because the field goal kicking was unmatched and the punting was unmatched. This was the best kicker-punter duo that we have ever seen in Marshall history.
And the return game, kickoff returns 21.5 yards, and that was 54th in the country. Punt returns 9.8 yards, 53rd in the country. We did really well with that because especially early in the season, before they started either kicking higher or kicking away from Floyd Lacey, it was like a week in, week out. He had 2 or 3 chances. He was going to take it to the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's. I hate this is going to be a quicker, section, but man, there's just not a lot of statistics out there, and everybody believes what they saw. It is what it is. We were both excited to see Lorcan Quinn because of all of it. The 24-year-old freshman from Ireland coming to Huntington, West Virginia. He'd never played American football before. Like, that will spark your interest, man. And we were really, really up and excited to see how he would play. Our breakout players, though, you stuck with Lorcan Quinn, which good call. I went with whoever rose out to become the punt returner, which became Floyd Lacey in the lion's share of return opportunities. And he was exciting, and he was better than what I thought it would be. We did not ultimately take one to the house. I think Lorcan Quinn was far and away a bigger breakout player than Floyd in the return game. The MVP of the unit, you also chose Lorcan Quinn. I did not pick one for some reason. I guess the discussion got away from me, and I just didn't pick one. And then I think this is the one where you surprised me with sleeper. I don't know, because I didn't have one of those either. I don't remember. But your sleeper pick was Lorcan Quinn. Big Quinn guy in the special teams breakdown. And man,
I did okay.
You did all right with that one. I think that was the best pick. I'd like to say sorry, Nathan Totten. We did not show you any preseason love, but we had no idea what was in front of us from both of you specialists. And wow, absolutely amazing season. So let's recap it all, Russ, and tell me what went right for you in 2025.
Can I throw in these two? It was penalties because they didn't fit on offense, defense, or special teams. Penalties per game, 6.8. It was tied for 96th in the country. Yards per game on penalties, 59.9, 98th in the country. So I think that we could also improve on that. A lot of those were very, very costly. They extended drives. A couple of them ended up losing the game, like at Louisiana. So what went right? I felt like scoring offense. What went wrong? Scoring defense, and again, the chunk plays. And what went right was our play on special teams all across the board. I think from a bird's eye view, those are the big ones for me to say. I could break it down and say, hey, we did great on turnovers forced. We did great on limiting turnovers. We did at times. Some games got away from us like Coastal. But I could break it down more, but I think scoring offense, special teams, excellent. Scoring defense, chunk plays, horrible. And I think that is my sum of the offense, defense, and special teams in the entire season.
What went right for me was rushing offense. What went wrong about rushing offense was the sheer number of carries that were handled by your quarterback.
Agree.
But overall, the rushing offense went really, really well. I would have, again, moving into 26, I hope I see an uptick around 20 to 30% of overall production from the run game. But, that's wishful thinking. And I understand you can't just snap your fingers and make that happen. What went right for me on defense was creating turnovers, which is always going to be the great equalizer in just about every game. What went terribly wrong was continually out of position, bad communications, which led to chunk plays and ugly touchdowns, which quite honestly lost games for us and games we could have had that just, James Madison comes to mind as a big one that you don't give up chunk plays like that. And maybe you got a better than a puncher's chance of coming out with that one. And I think about on defense, I would like to have seen, and even though we did a really good job getting quarterback sacks, it still seemed like whatever reason, or if it was over pursuit or whatever, we're still having trouble with the same kind of quarterbacks that our defense face every day in practice. So you would think they would be really, really good at handling a true dual threat quarterback like guys like CDRW, because damn, that guy's really talented and you're facing him every day in practice. Special teams, I don't think anything could have gone better other than if you say, you know what, we should have a higher kick return average. You know what, we should have a higher punt return average. Well, that's great and dandy and everything, but when you set a record for field goals made, when you set a record for punt average per punt average, whatever it is, the average punt yardage, whatever. I'm not going to be mad at that. I think that's awesome. I think that, but by and large, the two things that outweigh everything else were the late season turnover margin flip, where we started turning the ball over with more frequency when earlier in the year we hadn't, and never getting the chunk yardage or chunk plays under control. That to me was the story of the season down the stretch when you really needed to have it.
I look back through here to bring this back to when we started this show, this episode. I said maybe after we do all the stats, I would say what I thought the record could have been. I'm going to say 4 different games, and I'm going to name them right now. And if we need to talk briefly about each little thing, Missouri State, number 1. I think that you don't give up some of the chunk plays that we did. They don't get in position to go down there and win that game. When they did, they won it by 1 point. Louisiana, that's a big one. You just get one stop. We talked about that. One stop, and that game's over. One stop, that's it. That game's over. It doesn't go to overtime.
Yep. I mean, and to drive that one a little farther, even if you just say you get one stop, if you don't jump off sides on 4th down, right, that game's over.
Or that one was a late hit out of bounds too. Maybe wasn't there 2 different penalties there? But anyway, one stop wins that. One stop wins Missouri State. That was 2 gimmies. And then I think the last 2 games of the year, App State and Georgia Southern, I feel like as much as we struggled on offense early in that game, we still could have easily won that game with less of the chunk plays or just the as low energy as we played, we still could have won that game. 4 different games here. And we were only down 5 against JMU before they got that late touchdown that was a block in the back that wasn't called. We could have whatever at Coastal. I still maintain that those games, you're going to have one of those games. I know that we turned the ball over 5 times in a row, but we still lost by 17 points. So I'm not going to count that one, even though, look, we had mismatch playing out of position, gave them wide open touchdowns. We had chunk plays that we gave up. I'm still not going to count that game. So I'm going the last 2, Missouri State and Louisiana. You switch those 4 games, we're 9-3, and then that gives us an additional 3 wins. We would have been 6-2 in the Sun Belt. And at that point, you beat ODU, you tie them for the record. I think that we would have been right there with ODU, Troy, right below James Madison. If those 4 games go different, we lost them by a combined 11 points in those 4 games.
Yeah, I think those 4 in particular you can point to. You're not going to look at Georgia and go, well, if we'd have done this, we could have won that game. That one's out the window. Missouri State absolutely got away from you. That's one we could have won easily. Mm-hmm. And even by missing the field goal, you make a stop and they don't go whatever it was, 75 yards, 80 yards, whatever. Then you win the damn game. Louisiana, we've talked about over and over and over. You needed one freaking stop, and you couldn't get it. And then you even went to overtime and had an opportunity to win, still couldn't do it. And App State and Georgia Southern, either one of those games were easily winnable. And it was some bad luck at App State and some things we talked about, like if they don't call the Turner fumble a fumble on the field, it probably doesn't get overturned and made a fumble. But still, and that's the game where we just like against Georgia Southern where it wasn't called, that's the game where Toby Payne makes the catch, retreats behind the line, and we don't get the first down, which leads to Mike Allen fumbling on the next play. But it's just bad luck stuff. Georgia Southern, if you don't come out dead and show a freaking pulse in the first half, or if they make the quarterback switch a little quicker, halfway through the second quarter as opposed in the second half, maybe you have a different outcome there. I don't know. I can't get past Coastal. I understand it's a 17-point win, but damn, man, 5 turnovers on 5 consecutive drives, setting them up for touchdowns on some of those. Like, that one's not a far of a stretch for me to go, we gave that one away. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it would have been a win, but, dude, if you only turned the ball over twice, I mean, damn, 5.
I get what you're saying.
That was so wild, and I hope I never, ever, ever see that crap again. But so it's easy to say 4 games, but you can say, maybe 5. But yeah, this could have been a 9-win team with a handful of plays and a handful of stops and one less penalty here. And that's how thin of a margin that you have. And of course, some people will say, well, that's why you can't leave that thin of a margin. That's why you have to be better in most of the lion's share of a game. So it doesn't come down to a play like that or a play like it. And I get that. And you're not wrong, right? It's the same ballpark argument when people say, oh, well, the G5 doesn't belong in the playoffs, over this team and that. You say, well, if that team would have won more games, they'd be in.
Yeah.
Same thing. I get it.
KD, before we get out of here, this in Sunbelt play and conference play, and particularly the division that you're playing in, it's good to kind of know where you stand versus the others. This year, especially in the East, there were a lot of bad defenses. They ranked near the bottom nationally. But I just wanted to go real quick on scoring, passing, rushing, and total. This is just points and yards. On offense and defense, say where we ranked in the Sun Belt. Scoring 30.8 was good for 4th overall, 3rd in the East. Passing 207.9, 9th overall, 5th in the East. Rushing 197, 5th overall, 3rd in the East. Total 404.9, 4th overall, 3rd in the East. On the defensive side of the ball, scoring 30.3, 8th overall at 30.3. If that doesn't tell you how bad the Sun Belt was a lot this year. 4th in the East. Passing 261.7, 13th overall, 6th in the East. That shows you not only how bad that we were doing, but there was one team worse than us, and they just happened to be in the East. Rushing 148.9. It was 4th overall, 4th in the East. Total yards 410.6, 8th overall, 3rd in the East. And again, in conference play, Marshall, or not just in conference play, but amongst the conference, Marshall was last in chunk plays of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90. And they were 10th out of 14 in 20 plus. The chunk plays were the one thing this year that just killed us on everything. Yeah. Because again, a lot of those were touchdowns. And you start saying you get these tackles, you're doing so much better. That's the story for me. If I had one overall story, was we didn't get stops when we needed them all year long.
Yeah, that's just you can sum up the whole season really and say the chunk play killed you. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And you don't, anybody that watched this season will go, yeah, you just said it all in a nutshell.
Yeah.
The chunk play killed you. Well, this was fun. Went a little longer than I thought we were going to do, but hey, it won't be too much longer until the portal cycle begins. The portal actually opens, and then we're into spring and recruiting and all that good stuff. So let's take a football hiatus. Let's concentrate on Marshall basketball, both men's and women's, and we'll be getting into some diamond sports here in short order, and all of the other fun stuff that does not revolve around herd football. But Marshall football never sleeps. There will always be news and always be players and rumors and things of that nature. So let's put 2025 to bed and look forward to 2026. Russ, if you got anything else, let me have it. Otherwise, let's take it out of here.
Whether you see us at the vet, whether you see us at the dot, or whether you see us at the cam, no matter where you see us, we're going to be saying, go herd.
Go herd. It's the ThunderCast. We'll see you in year 2 for Tony Gibson. Later.